Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. We've got some great speakers, and I know we have a tight timeline. If all of the folks who are testifying could please join us up here at this table, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting of the House Energy Committee to order at 10 o'clock. Tabitha, will you please call the roll?
Chair Fiedler,
Here,
Rep. Boyd,
online,
Rep. Brown,
on leave,
Rep. Serrato,
on leave,
Rep. Davidson,
on leave,
Rep. Donahue,
on leave,
Rep. Friel,
on leave,
Rep. Dural, Rep. Inglis,
on leave,
Rep. McAndrew,
leave,
Rep. Pielli,
leave,
Rep. Rusnak,
leave,
Rep. Steele, Rep. Venkat,
online.
Chair Causer,
Here.
Rep. Armanini, Rep. Barton,
On leave.
Rep. Cook,
On leave.
Rep. Ham,
On leave.
Rep. Kale,
On leave.
Rep. Kephart, Rep. Mihalik,
On leave.
Rep. Rapp,
Here.
Rep. Stambaugh,
Here.
Rep. Warner,
On leave.
Rep. Williams.
On leave.
Thank you. You may proceed, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you to our members, our testifiers, and all of our guests today for joining us for a public hearing on House Bill 502. This is the second of two hearings on this bill, which is sponsored by Vice Chair Mandy Steele. It would create a new state board to help streamline the siting of electricity generation and storage projects. Given our energy supply concerns and rising electricity costs, I think this is important legislation, and I am looking forward to today's testimony and to further discussions about this bill. Today we have several testifiers, so once again we will keep a tight schedule and ask each of you to not exceed 6 minutes, if you would. It's important to us that our members have time to ask questions as well, and this will allow that. If everyone could please keep their questions until all of the testifiers have spoken, that would be great. Please use your time to summarize your written statements and know that all of the members have received the testimony that you have received, or that you have submitted, rather. Steve will help you out by raising a finger when you have 1 minute remaining. I'd ask the members to hold. Steve is the executive director of the committee. No problem, Chairwoman. He will not make any indications to you or any of the members, only to our testifiers to let them know. You are welcome. Chairman, is there anything you would like to say before we begin?
Thank you very much. And, energy is one of the biggest issues we face, and we need energy policy that actually promotes energy production. We heard a lot of concerns from our first hearing the other day, and I'm certainly looking forward to the testimony today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Also would like to acknowledge joining us now is Rep. Rusnak. Thank you for being here. We will begin with Ms. Dietz. If you would please start us off. Thank you for being here. And if you press the button, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairwoman Fiedler, Chairman Causer, and members of the committee. My name is Kathy Dietz, and I'm a director in Vistra's Corporate Development and Strategy Organization. Vistra is a leading Fortune 500 integrated retail electricity and power generation company that provides essential power resources to customers, businesses, and communities across the United States, including Pennsylvania. Vistra is the largest competitive power generator in the U.S. with a capacity of approximately 41,000 megawatts, enough to power 20 million homes, and operates in all the major competitive wholesale markets in the country. The electricity space has been changing rapidly, and so too has our company. In 2024, Vistra completed the acquisition of 3 nuclear sites through our acquisition of Energy Harbor.
I apologize for interrupting. These microphones are very sensitive. If you could just move even closer to you, I want to make sure everyone can hear, including the folks online. No problem.
Is that better? Ooh,
that's wonderful. Yes, thank you so much.
Now I hear myself. Okay, Vistra announced our intent to acquire 7 modern natural gas generation facilities from Lotus Infrastructure Partners. Here in Pennsylvania, Vistra has 1 nuclear and 3 gas-fueled power plants across the state, and once the Lotus acquisition is complete, The total generation will be close to 5,300 megawatts in Pennsylvania alone. We have offices in King of Prussia and Harrisburg, employ over 750 Pennsylvanians, and have a growing retail book of business in the Commonwealth where we serve more than 200,000 customers. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share Vistra's views on House Bill 502 and electric generation siting more generally. As of 2024, at least 22 U.S. states have established specialized energy permitting and siting boards or commissions responsible for overseeing the development of large-scale energy infrastructure. House Bill 502 will bring Pennsylvania in line with existing processes that accelerate siting decisions for key energy projects, which is important in this age of growing electricity demand and the need for generation to power it. To support the growth in Pennsylvania, the development of new power generation will be critical, but it has significant challenges. In addition to finding available, buildable real estate, there are business considerations, technical and engineering risks, infrastructure considerations, required permitting, environmental approvals, community impacts, and even political considerations. Vistra initiates each project assessment with business considerations. We use various metrics and indicators to assess commercial interest in a particular project within a given area, and then analyzes whether it can deliver the required generation in a mutually beneficial manner. Our objective is to engage early and often with policymakers, stakeholders, and the public to address community, environment, reliability, and affordability concerns proactively. Once we determine there's a market demand for new generation project and a viable path to deliver that electricity, we move into the technical evaluation phase. We assess critical infrastructure requirements, including the availability of natural gas supply, the presence of substations and transmission lines capable of supporting the new generation, and we use these technical assessments to determine whether the required infrastructure, timing, and cost remain aligned with the business case for the project. Vistra also places a strong emphasis on environmental stewardship throughout the process. Each project begins with a comprehensive environmental review that includes detailed studies of air emissions, water use and discharge, potential impacts on local wildlife habitats, any impacts to jurisdictional wetlands or other protected natural features. We proactively site and design our facilities to avoid or minimize adverse effects on sensitive areas. Our environmental team works closely with permitting agencies to ensure transparency, accountability, and the timely resolution of any issues. Environmental compliance at Vistra is not a checkbox. It's a foundational principle on how we do business. Community considerations are also a critical part of our process. We have a dedicated community relations team whose primary responsibility is to engage with communities surrounding both prospective and existing operating sites. During siting and development phases, our development and community relations teams work together to hold open houses, town halls, and public hearings to listen to community members and provide transparency about our prospective project plans. We meet regularly with local stakeholders and policymakers to understand concerns and align priorities. We also coordinate with first responders to assess their capabilities and identify any support or upgrades needed to safely accommodate our facilities. Vistra's approach to local engagement is hands-on and proactive, not only during the development and construction phases, but throughout facility operations. Ultimately, we aim to be a partner, not an adversary. Vistra also has a dedicated team of government affairs professionals that work closely with the development team to ensure that state leadership and members of the legislature representing the communities where we seek to site and develop projects are kept informed about potential projects and their progress. In addition, our regulatory team maintains regular communication with relevant state agencies to provide updates and ensure alignment with applicable regulatory requirements. Regulatory complexity can add years to the amount of time required to develop a new power plant. In contrast, a stable state regulatory policy can significantly accelerate and de-risk the timeline of a project by providing predictability, clarity, and coordination across the development lifecycle. The considerations I've described represent only a small portion of the essential inputs in deciding whether and how to move forward with responsible energy development. And while many of these steps may appear sequential, in practice they often occur concurrently and are interdependent, creating feedback loops that lead to continuous reevaluation throughout the decision-making process. We recognize that the siting authority in House Bill 502 is not intended to address every factor involved in a siting decision. However, by centralizing the approval process, the legislation reduces a significant amount of risk, offering greater clarity, transparency, and predictability for companies seeking to develop new projects by clearly outlining requirements and points of contact. I hope my testimony has been informative and helpful in shedding light on the processes that companies like Vistra undertake when evaluating and selecting sites for electric generation development. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Dietz. Thank you for being here. Next up, we have Mike Ford, PA Building and Construction Trades Council. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Chairwoman Fiedler and Chairman Clauser and everyone on the committee. My name is Michael Ford. I am the Secretary-Treasurer of the Pennsylvania State Building and Construction Trades Council. Collectively, we have 115 locals that represent over 130,000 members in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We are involved in every aspect of energy production. As you know, Pennsylvania is the second largest producer of energy and the second largest net supplier of energy to other states. I believe we are the #1 producer to the PJM grid. The energy sector is a vital component of Pennsylvania's economy and the foundation of Pennsylvania's middle class. The building trade supports Governor Shapiro's efforts to bring about a serious discussion on energy policy in the Commonwealth, and we support many of the components of the Lightning Plan, including HB 502, the Reset Board. I think all of us here understand the energy demand, especially electricity demand, is rising quickly. And to avoid brownouts, blackouts, skyrocketing prices for consumers, and costs that could severely impact the viability of key industries, we must get more energy on the grid. I don't know if anybody saw what the clearinghouse price for last summer's PJM auction was, but it was $269.92 per day. That's a 9 times increase from the year prior. We in the trade see this as a crisis, and when you are in a crisis, action by the General Assembly is needed. What we can't do is fight the same old fights, with one side saying gas and oil are the only solution to our problems, while the other side says that we should only invest in solar and wind. That's a bunker mentality on both sides, and it doesn't get anything done. It will also mean, which will also mean economic recession, job loss, electric bills so high that our constituents will look to replace the people that are their voices in the legislature. We in the trades support all of the above energy strategy. We support investments in wind, solar, hydro, coal gas, methane, nuclear, hydrogen, geothermal, and more. The energy workforce is not an obstacle to power generation in Pennsylvania. We have the men and women with the expertise to get these projects built, and when you employ local union workers, you can count on them to do the job right. They are the best trained, and our members live in these communities. It's important to them that they don't make mistakes and they don't do shoddy work that creates environmental issues for their families and their neighborhoods. One obstacle to power generation, however, is the siting and permitting process. It shouldn't take years for projects to get off the ground. We can all cite projects that we all know in our own areas that were abandoned or let go because it just never happened. This would create a state siting board, like many other states have done, red and blue states, to help site needed large-scale power projects. There is an opportunity with the legislation to, A, facilitate collaboration among state and local officials, plus stakeholders. 2, provide guidance to developers and local communities on the policies, regulations, and processes that govern energy projects. Very important is to ensure environmental protection. Let's be clear, this bill doesn't change any of the requirements for environmental permitting and review, but because the folks on the board will have knowledge of environmental laws and regulations, they'll be able to help ensure that the projects are sited so they minimize any environmental impacts. And they can also assist with resource allocation. The board will take a look, will be able to look at land, funding, and workforce considerations to site these projects to be most beneficial for Pennsylvania. Finally, I want to emphasize that we've seen good projects that have stalled or been canceled, not because they're unsafe, and not because they are poorly designed, but because a small vocal minority doesn't like change. They don't like the look of a solar field or the look of windmills, and they have delayed and blocked projects that would benefit tens of thousands of workers, businesses, and consumers. That's not just bad policy, it's very unfair. Everyone deserves a voice, but the inconvenience of a few people cannot outweigh an entire region's need for power, reliability, jobs, and economic development. We cannot let narrow interest override the public good. We in the building trades understand that there will be changes to the bill as it makes its way through the legislative process, and we are here to offer our perspective on those changes. Regardless, the intent of the bill to streamline the siting process is much needed and something that the legislature should take up without delay.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Our next testifier is joining us online, Robert Ruth. Robert, can you hear us? And if so, please go ahead.
Thank you. I can hear you, and can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And before you go, I should say also joining us are Representatives Serrato and Pielli. Go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Chair Fiedler, Chair Causer, and honorable members of the House Energy Committee for the opportunity to testify. As you heard, my name is Robert Ruth. I'm with NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council. We're an international nonprofit operating since 1970 to protect our public natural resources, health, and climate. I am based in Pennsylvania. I lead our climate and energy portfolio in the Commonwealth, and my role is to advocate for laws and policies that will create a cleaner, more affordable economy for all. And that is why I am here today to testify in support of Vice Chair Steele's Reset Board bill. NRDC supports House Bill 502 because it would provide a much-needed, consistent statewide framework for the siting of large-scale energy generation and energy storage projects in Pennsylvania. At a time when the state must rapidly build out reliable, low-carbon sources of electricity to meet growing demand, reduce pollution, and maintain grid reliability, this legislation creates a clear, transparent, and entirely optional pathway for permitting new projects. And it does so while ensuring environmental protections and community engagement are prioritized. Establishing the Reset Board within DEP would facilitate interagency coordination, robust public participation, and expert oversight. It would do so all while mitigating the extent to which inconsistent, or in some circumstances, as you've heard, obstructive local permitting practices can arbitrarily derail critical energy development. Importantly, Section 809 of this bill prescribes each of the environmental health and safety statutes that are entirely unaffected by the Reset Board. This bill would bring Pennsylvania in line with a growing number of states, as you just heard Mike say, blue states and red states that have established some statewide entity with the authority to assist in siting decisions for key energy projects. So last year, NRDC, we partnered with the Nature Conservancy and Clean Air Task Force to commission a study of 8 different states that reflect in different ways a range of permitting policy structures, binding statutory clean energy targets or lack thereof, and electricity generation portfolios. So these states ranged from Ohio and Indiana to Illinois and Virginia. The study was designed to illustrate best practices and recommendations for permitting and siting processes applicable to any state, regardless of their current legal framework. And as the study makes clear, there is a wide range of possibilities available to strike the right balance between local and state authority or discretion to site clean energy projects. I should also note this analysis predated and therefore did not consider the most recent siting laws that have been enacted in states like Michigan, Minnesota, and Massachusetts, which is just to reflect the speed at which other jurisdictions are taking action. We think that Pennsylvania should seize the opportunity to incorporate feedback on House Bill 502 during the legislative process so that we can improve the status quo and further enhance Pennsylvania's position as the largest net electricity exporter in the country. Timely deployment of carbon-free generation at scale is essential to addressing the resource adequacy challenges we currently face and will continue facing this decade. Doing so will help maintain energy affordability while also mitigating the worst impacts of the climate crisis. And while the need for clean energy has become increasingly urgent, the primary barriers to deployment have shifted from technical and economic challenges to social and institutional obstacles. And that's particularly the case at the state and local levels. So Pennsylvania has over 2,500 individual municipalities, each of which currently have autonomy in governing local land use ordinances and zoning and permitting requirements. Looking at the predominant resources that are currently awaiting interconnection in the PJM queue, specifically utility scale solar and battery storage, only about 5% of Pennsylvania municipalities have ordinances in place to govern the development of those resources, and those ordinances vary widely. This patchwork of inconsistent permitting processes and timelines can create significant bottlenecks, particularly when municipal officials are left to develop new regulatory frameworks without adequate support or guidance from the state. Looking at time, NRDC particularly appreciates the consideration of reliable energy storage facilities in House Bill 502. Storage is the clean, firm capacity resource that the PJM region needs and from which Pennsylvanians can most immediately benefit. Battery storage has the fastest development timeline of any resource. It provides similar capacity values to gas-fired generation, and it plays a critical role in balancing the intermittent nature of renewables on an increasingly clean grid. PJM's own reports have shown that battery storage can help the region reach 93% zero carbon resources by 2035 while maintaining grid reliability. This is an accelerated policy scenario that PJM examined. It is far beyond current state statutory targets in the region, but it is one that importantly would not compromise reliability. So to summarize, by focusing on projects that would meet standards for reliability, public benefit, and environmental compliance, House Bill 502 would enable Pennsylvania to maintain its role as an electricity generating powerhouse and do so in a way that is equitable, efficient, and aligned with both climate and economic development goals. So again, thank you for the opportunity to testify, and in particular, the opportunity to do so virtually. I will be back in Harrisburg several more times this month, but today is graduation day for my son and his kindergarten class, so that's a milestone I'm not going to miss. Thank you, and look forward to the questions and discussion.
Thank you very much for your testimony, and congratulations on the graduation. Next, we have Mr. Evan Vaughn joining us from the Mid-Atlantic Renewable Energy Coalition. Go ahead, please.
Great. Good morning, Madam Chair, Minority Chair, members of the committee. It's great to be here with you today. My name is Evan Vaughn. I'm Executive Director of the Mid-Atlantic Renewable Energy Coalition, which is a coalition of about 50 utility-scale wind, solar, and storage developers that are active both here in Pennsylvania and also across the PJM grid. To abbreviate my comments a little bit here, I think that what's really important about this bill and what our industry is looking for, like any business, and I agree with many of the comments made by my colleague from Vistra, we want predictability and certainty as much as possible around the investment decisions that our members are making. And we think that this legislation, House Bill 502, will provide that predictability and certainty that we're looking for. One thing I always like to preface these discussions with, I've been part of siting discussions like this in most of the states in PJM. And one thing that often gets communicated, which I think is important to clear up front, is that this is not a taking of private property. Every single one of the projects that our members develop have the consent of the landowner. And so local governments often have considerations that are not just isolated to the landowner, and that's appropriate, but this is not a taking. This bill would not be a taking of private land. We think that creating some kind of standardization process for our developers is really key for the maturation of projects out of the PJM queue. So there are about 9 gigawatts of solar, mostly solar, but also wind and storage in Pennsylvania's segment of the PJM queue. Those projects are not a sure thing. The historical maturation rate of those projects is about 20%. Right now, it's been closer to 5%. And one of the barriers to those projects coming out of the queue is local siting determinations. You can get your interconnection agreement, be ready to go, but if a locality ultimately says no, then your project doesn't materialize. And that's not just a temporary setback. That project is effectively dead, and it has to go back all the way to the start of the queue if it wants to be built. And so that can cause a 5-year delay for project development, which is totally untenable for any kind of energy resource. As you all know, and I'll skip over the details, you know that demand is growing rapidly. We are no longer in a period of low electricity growth. We are in a period where we need to be deploying more energy resources, and I agree that includes all of the above. And we can't afford to have good projects get stymied by, not bad faith by localities, but just a myopic view of what a good energy project is. Localities are not the bad guys, but they're not fundamentally set up to make judgments about energy projects that could be significant at the state or even regional level. We need a balancing that I think that this reset board would provide. We do care about those local relationships. Our projects are going to be in these communities for 30 years, right? We cannot have a relationship start with a fundamentally oppositional dynamic with the localities, but we think that this board will help to bring in more information from statewide experts about best practices, about regional electricity demand needs that will help those projects better build a bridge with the localities. I really want to commend the work that Governor Shapiro has done through the Lightning Plan, this legislature, for considering this bill. It can be a contentious issue, as I'm sure you all are already experiencing. It's contentious, but sometimes the contentious things are the most important. And I truly believe that we are not going to be able to meet the electricity demand that is forecast. And what that means is Pennsylvania is not going to meet its economic development goals if we do not have more certainty around project deployment. Doesn't mean every project has to be approved, but there needs to be a more rationalized and predictable process around it. And I think I'll just close by saying, we are here to help as a representative of the large-scale renewables industry. We want to be, in continued dialogue with the committee around refining this legislation. I think our members, as we gather feedback, probably will have some amendments that are more, technical in nature, but I look forward to continued engagement and taking questions from the committee. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for being here in person. We have one more testifier, and then we will take questions from members of the committee. Joining us online is Nick Cohen. Nick, can you hear us? And if so, please go ahead.
Great. Madam Chair and members of the House Energy Committee, thank you for inviting me to speak on behalf of HB 502 today. We are strongly in support of it. My name is Nick Cohen, and I'm the president and CEO of Doral Renewables, LLC. We're based in Philadelphia, and we have a 20 gigawatt portfolio of renewable energy projects. In PJM alone, we have a $1.5 billion project under construction right now with 1,200 unionized workers on site every day. We also have a project in Ohio with close to 500 people. That's almost 2,000 people employed building projects in PJM in Ohio and Indiana. And hopefully, with the help of the Lightning Plan and this bill, we'll see a lot of projects being built by Doral in Pennsylvania, our home state, where I also live. Another thing about this bill that I really like is that it does have a real opportunity to be bipartisan. The rural communities are benefiting as well as all of the constituents across the Commonwealth. Just to give you an idea, it's not just jobs that we're talking about. It's a manufacturing cluster. We have a project in Ohio where we bought tens of thousands of tons of steel that was made in Pennsylvania. And our project in Indiana, the $1.5 billion project, has more steel in it than the Empire State Building. And that was all produced in the Midwest. So there's a massive industry cluster with a lot of jobs. Also, for us, we've done a lot of outreach to communities, and there are, of course, the economic benefits to the communities and the farmers. Also, we're bringing agrivoltaics to our projects, and I think a lot of our competitors are as well, which is reintroducing food cultivation to the small farm. And that's a very important component to bring heritage farming back to the farms. The problem is that with all these efforts like heritage farming and public engagement and jobs and economic uplift, it only takes one or two local officials to kill $1 billion project. And this bill neutralizes that issue. So because there are definitely, we heard from some of the other speakers, certain remonstrators that somehow appear in every project situation, and it doesn't take much to have one or two people spoil it for the entire community, or in this case, the entire Commonwealth. So this bill is the most impactful piece of legislation that the energy business can have in Pennsylvania. Our success with siting boards has been very good. We just got a 1,200 megawatt project approved in Wisconsin going through their siting board. And what I like about these siting boards is that they're professional. They offer a lot of transparency to the public, and they even engage with objectors. And so it's very important. to have a professionals overseeing billion-dollar projects or $100 million for that matter. You know, anything bigger than a local chicken coop or garage, you know, does require some professional intervention, understandably. One other benefit that I think goes unrealized, but it's a big one, is that when the state takes over the decision process, it provides a tremendous amount of cover for the local officials. If you're a local official and you're dealing with the zoning, you get objectors, you get professional outsiders are coming in, and they create a tornado of chaos. It's very difficult. You have a day job and you're a commissioner, and you have hundreds of people screaming on both sides, and it's not what you got into the business for. You can now point to the state because it's now the state's responsibility. So this is a big deal because local officials are the ones who are the most likely to object to this bill. But this bill is actually doing them a huge favor. And if they realize that, I think it'll go a long way. So we're doing them a favor. And we're also restoring landowner rights, because when the state takes over, farmers can choose what they can and cannot do with their land. When it's local zoning, it often results in a no for a project, which means a no for a farmer that wanted to monetize their land differently. The last thing I'll say about the benefits that are kind of unforeseen, in a lot of zoning conditional use aspects or special exception, lawsuits are the only recourse. And so there's always a side that's not happy, whether it's the side for the project or against the project. And it results in very costly and time-consuming lawsuits for municipalities. So this will save a lot of money and legal bills at the local level. So with all that said, I just want to reiterate that this bill is the most important bill that we've introduced. More than half of all projects fail at the local level, and this will neutralize that situation. So we fully support the bill, and you know, we look forward to hopefully seeing wide acceptance of it, because this is the one energy on a farm is the one thing that brings everybody together, generally speaking. And this bill is the one thing that will deliver success for everybody in the Commonwealth. So, you know, I would hope that this bill gets a lot of support and ends up becoming a law. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. At this point, we will move to questions from our members. First, I want to say it's incredibly important to me that we find a way to bring more energy projects online and keep consumers' bills down. And at the same time, it's incredibly important to me that we make sure that we are respecting the land of this Commonwealth and the people who already live in these communities. I think it's possible to do all of this. Maybe that's ambitious, but I think we give it a shot. And it is important to me that those things happen before we move this bill forward, both that we find a real path for local leaders to have a say on major energy projects in their community, and that we feel confident about keeping consumers' bills down. I wanted to ask Mr. Vaughn, in your testimony, you mentioned siting boards in some other states, in particular Ohio and Kentucky, that you believe have helped speed the siting and construction of projects there. We had a great deal of discussion in the first hearing on Monday about the structure of the siting board that's proposed in this bill. So could you talk a little bit about the structure of the boards in other states, and in particular as well, the public input process?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So I'll try to take maybe both of the states in brief. So I think, first of all, the success that we've seen with these other states has been played out in terms of megawatts in the ground. So Ohio's had over 5,000 megawatts of renewable energy deployed, and that's largely because they had a predictable process. Kentucky, it's a newer state for renewables. Their solar industry really only got started in the last few years, but they've already added about 500 megawatts over the last few years, which I do believe off the top of my head is more than Pennsylvania added in the last few years. So That's been really significant and positive to see. So to your question about what is the structure of the boards and the public participation process, one of the key differences that I see, and I'm not making a value judgment on this, I'm just presenting the facts, is that Ohio and Kentucky both have ad hoc members on their boards. So it's not one singular siting board. The boards are constructed around each project, and they have ad hoc members from the localities sit on the board. I think there's pros and cons to that. Again, not making a value judgment there, but that is one difference that I've observed. I think in terms of the public participation process, one thing that both of those states also require is early notice to the localities. And we as developers think that that's important as well. And I believe that's in the reset legislation as well, that there's a certain like advance notice you have to give. I think that's a good practice. It helps, nothing is worse for a project than having a county executive or a member of the county council feel like they've gotten ambushed by a project because an application got submitted at the state level. And so it is not just a good thing to do, it's the respectful and I think necessary thing to do, that there be early notice for the localities so that they have a chance to really do their own learning, figure out, what's best about the project from their perspective before the state process kicks off. I hope that helps and answers your question.
It does. And I just want to follow up briefly, and then I'll turn it to Chair Causer. Can you describe some of the obstacles that some of your members feel they face when it comes to proposing some of these projects and interacting with local government entities that may not have necessarily the experience in the specific field that they would need to assess the project?
Sure. I think what it often comes down to is just a different level of understanding about the issues, and that cuts both ways, right? Developers often don't have the best perspective on the locality's specific needs because they might be developing their first project in that locality. And that's the developer's job, to learn about the locality and the locality's needs. On the other hand, the localities do not, I don't think it's their role to understand in great detail what, the PJM electricity market's needs are, what the, Commonwealth's electricity needs are. And so there's often a misunderstanding between folks who are, well-intentioned, who don't understand, for example, that solar projects are not picking, prime farmland because they just want to eat up prime farmland. In fact, they'd rather have marginal lands because they're cheaper. The rent value is cheaper. But they're choosing those lands because of a complex series of considerations, including where's the headroom on the transmission grid. And they often cannot just move somewhere else, even though that's an often, reasonable thing for a locality to think, well, we don't want your project here, but you can put it over there. Well, the project can't go over there for transmission grid reasons, and it's really hard for a locality to understand that, and they really shouldn't have to take on that burden of expertise, in my opinion.
Thank you. And I think that's important to point out that both sides of this bring an expertise to the project and the discussions, and that local officials, I think, do a real service to their community. In many cases, working long hours for little or no pay simply to help represent their neighbors. Thank you for that. Chairman Causer?
Thank you very much. And the term that I keep thinking about is the state knows best. And those are frightening words to especially people who live in rural Pennsylvania. If you arrive at their farm or their location, you say, the state knows best what you ought to be doing. And most often that doesn't work out the way that folks intend. And the thing that keeps coming back in my head is for years and years and years, we've seen energy projects in this state that have been proposed, most of them oil and gas related, and projects where, a community may strongly support the project, but environmental groups will get involved and object and object and object. We saw a project in Clinton County in Renova that was a huge energy project for the community, and the community strongly supported it. Well, these outside environmental groups objected repeatedly to the point where the company walked away. Now we're talking about renewable projects, solar, wind. All of a sudden, there's a focus on the state knows better than these local officials, is what's being said. I still think that we need to consider the local government impact because they really do know their community. And We heard the other day at our other hearing the concerns that were expressed by the local government community. My question to you folks is, do you really believe that the local government officials are the holdup in this process? Are they really stopping energy projects across this Commonwealth?
Yeah, I'd be happy to address that for a minute. First, I think we have to get control of the narrative. The narrative here, it's not about the state knows best, which some people are going to say. It's about the state is stepping in to protect landowner rights. Because the local officials, firstly, it is important to have engagement from the local community and the local officials, because a project gets shaped by the input. If you're a good developer, a project gets shaped by the inputs that you get from the community leadership and other members of the community. And by the way, HB 502 has plenty of mechanisms in it to engage the local community and the local officials and for them to be heard. So, I think the bill is very balanced that way. But at the end of the day, to your question of is the local officials messing everything up, when it's going well, no, they're the ones who are helping. A lot of times the local officials are the ones that grab the bull by the horn and they get everybody to realize the benefits and to dispel the misinformation. There's a lot of good leadership out there, and we experience it everywhere. But there are many instances where just one local official is enough to shut it down. And that's what we're dealing with, that you could convince 99% of the people, and 1% is all it takes to end the project and end the opportunity for Pennsylvania. So it can be, that's the whole problem. There's no way that in every situation you can convince everybody of the true benefits. But the most important takeaway that I give to all of you is that state intervention is protecting landowner rights. And it's a matter of fact, if you look at all these other states that have these siting boards, the landowners were able to make a business deal and do what they need to do on their land. When that siting board was not around, 50% of the counties or municipalities said no to a project. And by the way, that's saying no to a farmer who wanted to do something besides corn and soybeans. And now they're being told you can't do anything but what you're doing now on your farm. So let's restore the rights of landowners and farmers through this bill.
Anyone else care to comment?
I'll be
Yes,
brief.
Chair Causer.
Sorry. Let me just say something really quickly. Slightly different tack from Nick there. I think my fundamental question, back to this body, and it's not just aimed at the Republican side of the aisle, is if we are facing the kind of electricity demand crunch that PJM says we're facing, do we feel comfortable that all of the localities in Pennsylvania will come together with a solution collectively that's going to ensure we have enough electricity on the grid? And I'm not sure that they might, but I'm not sure I can say that with absolute certainty. And so ultimately, the folks in charge of the Commonwealth are going to be the ones that people are pissed at if there is not enough electricity or it's too expensive. And right now, you don't have the ability really to impact that because the localities can deny any given project, whether it's solar or gas or anything else.
I think there's a lot of things that they could be upset about, but I think that local input is important. And I'll just circle back to the fact that the state doesn't always know best. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I do think it's important to point out that many states already have this sort of board. And as was mentioned, that includes blue states, red states, states all over the United States. So this is an example of something that exists in many other places. And also to Mr. Ruth's point, only 5% of local municipalities have local ordinances in place to address these sorts of projects. So I think those are both important pieces of information just to emphasize that we are grateful to local elected officials for all they do, and at the same time, there is value in providing a structure to make sure that they really do get to have a say in what happens in their community. I'm going to have the first question go to Vice Chair Steele, as this is her bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for that point. And I would add to that point and say that not only is this something that other states are doing, but it is working in other states. And so I just feel it's essential here to reiterate a couple of points. And the first essential point is that PJM is telling us that demand is rising and that we have to do something, or we are going to be in a full-blown crisis in Pennsylvania. My constituents cannot afford to pay the kind of electricity bills that they are going to be hit with if we don't do something. What are we going to do? What has worked in other states that are facing a similar crisis is a state siting board. And that is what we are examining today. This is, when I looked at the governor's lightning plan, I like a lot of aspects of it, but this to me is the most important part. And we have got to get this done. And whatever that means, taking all the input that we possibly can, working with colleagues in a bipartisan collaborative way to make some changes here that we feel are essential. The bottom line is we've got to get this darn thing done, and we've got to get it done fast. The second point is that I want to make is that this siting board would not usurp, clearly stating this, would not usurp the environmental permitting process that is still in place. These projects must go through that thorough process that we have. It will continue to stay there, and communities will have a level of protection that they have come to expect here in Pennsylvania. Third, as Mr. Cohen said, professional intervention when we are talking about projects that are sometimes $1 billion in value is important. I say this as in my former life, I was a local council person, and I was also the chair of my community's comprehensive plan. And so I thoroughly understand our role as council people. Local involvement, as Chair Causer said, is so important because these are the people that know our communities best. But so is professional intervention. So are the professional voices in this process. We've got to have both. And so I look forward to continuing that conversation as to how to refine this so that we've got both. The next point I want to hit that is so vital is that this is an all of the above bill. We have heard people saying that this is a renewables bill. It is not. It is an all of the above bill. Renewable projects will increase, so will fossil fuel projects. We have to bring more energy projects of all kinds. That is what PJM is telling us. We need diversification of our grid. This is how we do it. My question is am I sounding a little angry, I'm realizing? I'm not meaning to at all. I feel strongly, though. My question is to the group. How do I sound angry? Okay. Did they say I did? That's okay. What is this bill missing? How can we alleviate Chair Causer's concerns and the other concerns that we've had from members of both sides of the aisle on local participation? What needs to change? Thank you. And to anyone. Or is the bill perfect and we should just all vote yes? Okay.
I'll address it. The bill, the bill does provide plenty of opportunities for local engagement. And so, I wouldn't add anything else. If local, I guess I would ask local representatives, what they think, but you probably already did because the representation in the process is in the bill.
In other states, do you see something that other states are doing that we don't have in this bill?
No. We went through Wisconsin, which is one of the more rigorous processes, and our project was the biggest project in Wisconsin, and it was approved just a few months ago. So it was a very professional process, and there were several hearings, and we had all sorts of experts doing all the things that this bill asks developers to do and prove. And this one went a step further because you have to provide some of this information to the local municipalities, which we didn't have to do that in Wisconsin. It all happened in a public, transparent forum. This bill actually digs a little deeper and forces you to engage with the local officials. And by the way, if they don't want to meet with you, you have to explain why as part of the requirements in this bill. So this bill, in terms of engagement with local officials in the local community, goes further than some of the other ones. And I just point to Wisconsin because we just went through it, and it's been around for a long time, and it's very successful. It's accounted for a lot of projects, and at the end of the day, during the hearings, there are people who object, and they come out and they're heard. And in fact, in our case, there were some people that had objections over a wildlife issue, and we were forced to compromise. And by the way, forced is too strong of a word because we're a friendly developer, but it brought everybody to the table to have serious discussions about how can we change this project to address the concerns of the counterparties. And so the local people were heard, the objectors were heard, and the commission served as a objective professional arbitrator.
Thank you, Mr.
And,
Cohen.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Ruth, I see you have your hand raised. If you could respond very briefly, and then we will go straight to Representative Kephardt's question.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Vice Chair Steele, for the points that you raised. I know better than to call any piece of legislation perfect, but I'll just reiterate some of the points that Nick just made and do so briefly. House Bill 502 requires project applicants to conduct meaningful consultation with municipalities before engaging with the reset board. They also have to provide detailed environmental and siting information as part of their application materials to receive a reliable energy certificate. So we think the bill strikes a reasonable balance by offering, in this case, just a new pathway, a new channel, a new forum for dialogue between local officials, project developers, and statewide experts. It preserves important protections for local communities and ecosystems. So I view this less as a way of usurping local authority and more as providing state resources to better inform projects. There are multifaceted issues with energy development, including with PJM's queue, with supply chain issues, with labor shortages. This bill is narrowly targeted at trying to streamline at the local level so that we can get more clean, reliable, affordable electrons on the grid quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Ruth. Thank you, Representative Steele. Representative Kephardt.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and I want to thank you as well for having 2 hearings on this bill to allow us to actually ask questions. I do appreciate that, regardless of where you are on the bill. I just want to, I wasn't going to get into this, but just for 1 minute, I want to say, I have I have a district that probably has more solar or proposed solar than anybody on this committee, probably any other legislator. I have the largest solar panel project east of the Mississippi River coming into my district, 10,000 acres. I have solar just real close. There's a person in this room that's been involved with that. I have windmills, coal, gas, oil, you name it, we got it, except nukes and hydro. So I'm an all of the above energy person, but to hear that you guys are for this is wild. So tomorrow, the Environmental Board or Committee is going to have a hearing on killing the conventional oil industry. This committee, when it was both last year, had to kill the natural gas industry with the setback bill everybody voted for over there. So I would just say that's crocodile tears. But so I would also know, Chairman Causer is a geographic neighbor of mine, and maybe that's why he stole some of my thunder where I wanted to go with this. With, in this bill on page 14, it says a board's decision is appealable to the Environmental Hearing Board, and it limits it to the administrative record developed before the board. There has been Republican legislation introduced for years that has been opposed by NGOs, DEP, saying that we have to have a full-blown trial and everything else at the Environmental Board. But now, I'm just curious of what changed that now before the Environmental Hearing Board, we're going to limit it to the administrative record. We've been asking that for years. You know, if that was the case, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't have, maybe it would have, but Renova would probably have happened. What happened in Renova, as Chairman Causer said, an outside group came in called the Clean Air Council and destroyed that project. $1 billion investment. I went to school in Clinton County, Lock Haven. I lived near there. The people wanted it, as Chairman Causer said. The local mayor, we had a hearing up there. It was like 5 times the budget of the whole borough or municipality. They were going to get off this. I mean, like $600,000 or something. Their budget was like 140. The local IBEW would have been building the plant. The president of the building trade sat right there and said his guys would have built it. The school district, it was going to get like 500,000 off of this, or $1 million. I mean, it was the 500,000 was the county. The school district was like $1 million. I mean, that's huge money in Clinton County. And I would love for these projects to come online in my district. But unfortunately, we've had a war on coal for how long? Now we have a war on natural gas. They've moved past the coal at this point. But anyhow, I'm just curious what changed that now we are going to limit the record of the Environmental Hearing Board to the administrative record developed by this board. I mean, in my opinion, you should probably just go to the Commonwealth Court after this instead of forget the Environmental Hearing Board. But I'm just curious if the NGOs, so maybe NRDC can answer this, because you guys are, one of the backgrounds I had in law school was I have a certification in environmental and energy law, and you guys are, there's lots of cases with you guys that are history, NRDC, the Chevron case and all that. I think you guys were part of that. Maybe there was another one I can't remember. But anyhow, are you guys okay with this now? That I think Senator Barlotta in the Senate had the bill or something recently.
Representative, I'm sorry.
I'm
I just want to
sorry.
make sure you get
Yep.
your question
Yeah,
answered.
my question
Did you
is,
want
yeah,
it from
so
Mr.
sorry.
Ruth?
Let me narrow what I was really going to ask. Is page 14 of this legislation, it says in appeal, a board's decision is limited to the administrative record. Are the NGOs and DEP, DEP can't answer this, they're not testifying today, but thank you for being here. Are you guys now okay with limiting this so that we can't have outside trials going on with outside experts and everything? Are you okay with limiting it to the administrative hearing board or the administrative record?
Since NRDC came up, I'm happy to step in here. I'm not aware of any inconsistency. We are supportive of the language in that section as it currently exists, but there are a number of good proposed amendments that have been submitted in comments that have been filed as part of this hearing. We're open to any kind of process reforms that would help improve both the policy and the status quo and be able to, again, get clean, reliable, affordable electrons on the grid quickly. And I think the invocation of Renovo might be a bit of a red herring here, because that project, there was, it involved an appeal of permits that were offered under different state statutes, and financing for the project didn't come together. I'm not aware that the developers would have been able to make use of the reset board one way or the other. I'm not sure the status of what their municipal approvals were at the time. So, but again, interested in any sort of process reforms that could help improve this bill. But no concern about that particular section
so
as it is.
I just want to follow up on the actual legislation. I promise, Chairwoman, last thing. So if say this bill does not become law, because I don't think the Senate's probably going to do it, but if this is a standalone bill, would you guys, with this section in page 14, would you support the legislation?
If section 14 was split out from this bill, and
No,
made a standalone bill,
page 14, section D there, it says appeal. Would you support that if it was a standalone bill?
I'd have to take a look at the language once it was separated out.
But I thought you
and
just
it
said
would
you
depend on
approved of it.
which-
Okay, thank you.
Thank
in
you.
the context of this overall bill, limited to electricity generators and energy storage facilities.
Thank you. We will finish with a question from Representative Inglis.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fiedler. Really, I guess in the end, I just have 3 more summative, easy yes or no questions. Really, any of our testifiers could answer, but for the sake of convenience, I'll ask Mr. Vaughn. Do we have energy needs in our Commonwealth when considering future development, expansion, and stability?
Yes.
In your opinion, would you think that our Commonwealth has missed out on opportunities in the past in terms of energy projects due to our current procedures, processes, and systems in place?
Yes.
In your opinion, would reset aid in preventing our Commonwealth from losing opportunities for future energy projects?
Yes, it's not the whole story, but yes.
That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Representative. Seeing that it is now 11:01, I'd like to wrap this hearing up. I'd like to once again thank all of our testifiers, all of our guests, and thank you to the members. Any closing comments, Mr. Chair? All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.